If this reading found you today, there's a great chance you've been carrying one question in your heart for longer than you'd like to admit. Maybe you don't say it out loud anymore. Maybe you've stopped asking your friends. Maybe you've even told yourself it's time to move on. But somehow your heart keeps coming back to the same place. Was this really the end? Maybe for you or for someone else? Or is there really still something unfinished between you guys? Sometimes it's an old photo, sometimes it's a song that brings them back to your mind, sometimes it's completely unexpected. And for a brief moment, it feels like they're right there with you again. Then your reality settles back in again. And the silence between you starts asking questions that no one else seems to be able to answer for you. Was this connection truly over? Or are we simply in a chapter neither of us understands yet? Now, today we're going to let the cards answer that for you. Not with false hope and definitely not with fear. Instead, we're going to look beneath the surface of this separation because these three cards just don't describe what happened. They reveal what's changing beneath the silence and the realizations this person may be moving through that you cannot see yet. Before we turn over the first card, comment I receive if you want and if you feel this reading found you at exactly the right moment. Now, before we turn over the first card, I want to say something about separation itself. Because separation has a way of revealing things that love alone sometimes cannot. When two people are together every day, it's easy to get caught up in routines, misunderstandings, and emotions of the moment. But when that connection is suddenly interrupted, all of those distractions begin to fade. What's left is simply the truth. Some people usually use that space to move on, some people use it to even avoid their feelings, and some people, for the very first time, begin to understand what the relationship truly meant to them. Now, that's why separation can be such a strange teacher. It doesn't always bring two people back together, but it almost always reveals something that couldn't be seen while they were still standing side by side. Sometimes the realization is that the connection wasn't as deep as they believed. And sometimes I feel the realization is exactly the opposite for you, that what they had was far more meaningful than they ever appreciated while it was still in front of them. Now, that's what makes today's reading so interesting because these cards aren't focused on what happened in the past. They're focused on what has been unfolding beneath the surface. Now, the thoughts that haven't been spoken yet, the emotions that haven't been shared, and I'll say the quiet realizations that often happen when no one else is watching. We'll see all of that in today's reading. So let's turn over the first card because I have a feeling it explains exactly where this journey begins. The very first card is Ace of Swords reversed. And I have to say, this is one of the most revealing cards that could have appeared for this question. Because despite what people may think, this card isn't about someone who has stopped thinking about you. It's um, more about someone whose mind is still trying to make sense of everything that happened. Now, upright Ace of Swords represent clarity. It's that moment when everything suddenly clicks for you. The confusion disappears, the truth becomes obvious, and you know exactly what you need. But reversed, that moment hasn't fully arrived yet. Instead, this card describes someone who's caught between confusions and understanding. I feel they've started seeing things differently. Pieces of the puzzle are beginning to come together for them, but they haven't reached the point where they can confidently say that now I understand. That's why this card feels so significant in a reading about separation. Now, because separation often creates something that the relationship itself couldn't, space. And sometimes it's only in that space that people begin noticing everything that they were too distracted, too emotional, or too overwhelmed to see before. I'm not just talking about missing someone, I'm talking about genuine self reflection. Looking back at conversations, choices, even silences, arguments, wondering whether could I have handled that differently? Did I misunderstand something important? Was I protecting my ego instead of protecting the relationship? The Ace of Swords reverse suggests those questions may already be unfolding inside this person. Now, definitely not because someone else forced them to, but because life has finally become quiet enough for those very thoughts to surface. One thing I always find very interesting about this card is that a reversed ace doesn't mean the truth is absent. It simply means the truth hasn't fully settled yet. The realization is still coming. And somewhere the understanding is building, but they're still in the middle of that journey. And that's an important distinction for you. Because someone who hasn't reached clarity, I feel, often appears silent from the outside. Not because they don't care, but because they don't yet know how to explain everything that's changing inside them. Now let's move on to the second card. Okay, we have the Hierophant, and this changes the entire direction of this reading completely, because the Ace of Swords reversed showed us where this person's mind is. The Hierophant shows us what they're beginning to understand. This isn't the kind of realization that disappears after a few emotional days. This is deeper than that. The Hierophant is a card of wisdom earned through experience. It speaks about lessons that change the way someone else sees themselves, even their relationships and the choices they have made so far. Sometimes we only understand the value of something after we're no longer living inside it. That's the feeling I get here. This person isn't simply replaying memories, they're trying to understand what those memories were trying to teach them. They're looking back at this relationship with a very different perspective. Not just asking what happened, but definitely asking why it happened. Why, or what was I meant to learn from it? What would I do differently if life gave me another chance? Now, that's a very, very different question. And that's why I love seeing the Hierophant after I see the Ace of Swords reversed. The first card says, I'm beginning to see. And the second card says, now I'm beginning to understand. That's the difference between seeing a mistake and allowing that mistake to change you. The Hierophant has always been associated with commitment, not just commitment to another person, but commitment to becoming a better version of yourself within this relationship. It asks difficult questions like, am I emotionally available? Do I know how to communicate honestly? Do I protect the relationship or only my own point of view? Those aren't easy questions now, but they're the kind of questions that create lasting changes, especially in relationships. So, if you're wondering what this person has been doing during this silence, these cards suggest they haven't simply been thinking about losing the relationship. They've been thinking about understanding it. And sometimes I feel that's where the real transformation begins. And now let's see the last card as well, the Devil. Oh, and I know this card makes a lot of people nervous, but before you let your mind jump to the worst case scenario, I want you to take a deep breath. Because in this reading, the devil isn't the villain. That's one thing I'm very sure about. It's the explanation. One of the details I love most about this card is something many people never notice. There are two figures chained, but the chains are loose. They could easily remove them. They're not trapped by force here, if you can see. They're trapped because they haven't yet realized they're free to choose differently. That's the real message of the devil in this reading. Not evil, not darkness, not hopelessness. Patterns, habits, old fears, and emotional conditioning. The beliefs we keep repeating until they begin to feel like facts. Wow. And that's exactly what this card is highlighting in this connection. This separation wasn't created by a lack of love, it was created by something that quietly existed underneath that love. Now, I feel maybe it was fear of vulnerability, maybe it was pride, maybe it was emotional walls built long before the two of you ever met. Now, whatever it was, it slowly became stronger than the conversations that needed to happen. Now, this is why I find the order of these cards so fascinating. The Ace of Swords reversed shows someone beginning to question their old way of thinking. The Hierophant shows those questions turning into genuine wisdom. And now we have the Devil. The Devil reveals that those realizations are actually uncovering. And what exactly are they uncovering? A pattern, not just in this relationship, but within themselves. Sometimes we spend months believing another person was the entire problem, only to realize later that what we've been carrying could be certain fears, defense mechanisms, or even beliefs into every relationship we've ever had. That's the kind of awakening I see here. This isn't simply someone missing you, it's someone beginning to recognize the emotional habits that may have contributed to losing something they genuinely valued. And here's the hopeful part as well in this reading. The devil doesn't say those chains can never be broken. It, in fact, reminds us that they were never locked in the first place. I feel real freedom begins the moment someone becomes aware of what's been holding them back, a sort of awareness. And awareness is exactly where these cards have been leading from the very beginning. Now, let's take a step back and look at all these three cards together as one story. Because individually, each card tells us something important. Together, they tell us why this separation happened, what's changing now, and what still remains possible for you. The Ace of Swords reverse tells me this person's journey begins with confusion. Not confusion about whether this relationship mattered, but confusion about themselves, about the choices they made, and about the words I feel they never spoke, about, or could be even about the moments they now wish they had handled differently. Then we move to the Hierophant. And that's where the confusion slowly becomes understanding. This person isn't just replaying memories anymore, they're beginning to learn from them. They're seeing the relationship through different eyes and different perspective now. Not to punish themselves, that's for sure, but to understand who they were while they were living in it. And finally, we have our last card, the devil. The devil reveals what all of those realizations have been pointing towards. The real obstacle wasn't necessarily the relationship itself, it was the fear, the emotional pattern, and the belief or the part of themselves they hadn't yet confronted. That's why I don't see these cards as a story about two people drifting apart, to be honest. I see them as a story about someone being forced to face themselves. Because sometimes separation doesn't create change, it rather reveals the change that was waiting to happen all along. Now, I know the question that brought many of you here, will we be together again? And I want to answer that honestly. These cards do not make. These cards don't promise reunion, but they don't close the door either for you. Instead, they show someone who is still in the middle of an important inner transformation, I feel. Whether that transformation eventually leads back to this connection, only time and free will can answer that. But tarot reveals energy. It cannot replace the choices two people make. So perhaps the better question isn't will they come back? Perhaps it's if they do, will both of you have become the people this relationship needed you to be? Because that is the question these cards keep returning to. And that is the energy I can pick up from these cards. And if there's one message I really hope you carry with you after this reading, it's this. Sometimes love doesn't fall apart because it wasn't real. Sometimes it falls apart because two people meet before they're fully ready for the whole love they've found. Now, that doesn't make the love any less meaningful. It simply means the lesson became part of the journey. I hope these cards brought you clarity and perhaps a little peace. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next reading.